All right, so let's get started. What I have here is some new paints. I've got 3 colors from BlockX Aquarelle. They are paints from a manufacturer in Belgium, and they're selling them now at our local art store, and I thought they would be an interesting color to select to paint with and to see if I like them, because if I do, I might actually start buying these a lot more. Um, yeah, so let's get started. What I want to do here today is simply mixing these colors to see different things. For example, I'll mix them with each other so we can get the secondary colors, see how bright they come out. And I'll also test each color in terms of color intensity. Out of the tube, what does it look like? And what do we end up with after we water it down? So let's get started. Yellow. My yellow is BlockX Yellow, and it's a PY3. So if you kind of look at paints, you'll know that this is not an uncommon pigment for yellow, often used for Hansa. And so therefore, it means that the company is simply using pigments that everybody else uses, but its own name, giving it its own name. And the name itself, BlockX, is just it doesn't serve any other purpose other than identify the fact that it's by that manufacturer. So let's get started with the yellows. All I'm doing here is adding water to dilute the color and make it lighter as I go across my value scale. Now, yellow is very light to begin with, so it's very hard to get much of anything else out of that value selection here that we have. It's going to go from pure out of the tube, which is about as pure as I can get because I even have some yellow pigment visible on my brush. And yeah, that's it. All right, so we'll move on to the next one, which is going to be the quinacridone magenta. And this one, it's quite nice. It also actually, let me see, this one is a PV19, I believe, PV122. It's also a very common pigment used by other manufacturers for magentas. So let's take a look at it in its purest intensity. The color itself is called quinacridone magenta, so no name change, nothing funny about it. Across manufacturers, often used. That name is often used. So here's a nice pure color here of the magenta. It's quite pretty, very intense. And now I want to water it down a little bit, but not taking all the pigment out, and see what I can get as a second value. I might even be able to add a little bit more to that color intensity for the second value. So in order to do that, I'll just take a little bit of my pigment and add some more. There we go. Let's water that down and see what we get now. We're really getting down to that pink color now, very pinky, light pink. Very pretty, easy to apply, nice color to work with always. Magenta makes beautiful purples or violets. And maybe I can get another value out of this one, which is almost white. We're not seeing a lot of color in here, but just enough for the surface of the paper to be colored. And now let's try the blue. Blue is very intense, very nice. Primary blue, and if you have any kind of quinacridone, a phthalo blue, PB153 is very popular for a phthalo blue. So really what we're looking at here is phthalo blue green shade. Some manufacturers break down their phthalo blues into 2 different colors, green shade and red shade. This would be the green shade. Now I'm taking, again, I find that a little bit too light, so I'm just going to pick up more color here. bring it down to this. I might even maybe, it's kind of hard to say here, maybe add a little bit more blue just to make a good variety. And then I'll water it down for the next value. Water it down for the next value. I'm really just dipping my brush very lightly in the water and adding it to my scale here, to my value scale. And this one again, very light, not much color there at all. That's about it. All right, so the next colors on this side are going to be mixes of these colors together. Let's start with an orange. What we do to get an orange, of course, is take a little bit of the red here. Just bring some of that down. And I will, just so I can keep my yellow nice and clean, I'll just bring some yellow down here. And why I want to keep it clean is because I will be mixing it with blue next to get the green, right? So here's my orange. That's very intense. I've got some pure pigment in here mixing up, so it's going to be pretty. It's thick in a sense that there's a lot of pigment with a smaller amount of water than the other ones here have, for example. And now I'm going to do the same. I'll just water that down to the next level. And that gives me a slightly lighter orange. Once again, water, take some water out so I don't have all that water on my brush when I put it down. So there we go, that's the next value, and I'll do it again. See, I have a lot of water on my brush. If I do this, I get drips, and that's why I do this on my palette. I tap it so that that water, that excess water, comes off my brush. Because if I put too much water on the paper, the colors, well, it's just it'll move too far. It'll maybe roll off my tape and serve no purpose. It takes forever to dry, and it's not the best way to paint. You should never be drippy when you're painting in watercolor. You want your paint to be nice and wet on your brush, but you still need to control what's there. So here's a pretty nice orangey mix here. Wow, I'm going right to the end here, and I like it a lot. That's a beautiful color. It's a really beautiful orange. Yeah, you could use an orange out of a tube if you wanted to, but look at the beautiful oranges you can get with these primary colors. So the next one is going to be not a new color, but just a mix again of two colors. And I'll do the blue and the yellow. Now there's a lot of water here again, kind of drippy, right? So I want to go get some of that nice pure pigment to make it a little thicker, in the same way that I'm going to use some of that pure pigment there to make it thicker. And that looks like a reasonably good green. I don't want it to be a blue green or a yellow green. I want it to be a middle of those two green. So this is looking kind of a good colorish here. There we go. It's almost a little bit on the blue green, but it's not too bad. There we go. Let's try that. That's a pretty good green. And that's my first color. Fairly intense. Same thing. Dip it in the water. Can even soak off a little bit on your paper towel. Again, same idea. See, when I get that puddle, I say, well, I've got a bit too much water. Puddle, lifting. There we go. And in fact, this one is not very light. So I'm just lifting, I'm passing my brush down. While it's still wet, I can do that. And now I'm taking a lot of water off and or paint off. I just want a little touch of color here because I'm not going to get too far. I could probably have gotten another value between these two, but that's okay. I want this one here to be the lightest one of all. So not much color there. Okay, and now the violet, and I did mention earlier how the magentas with this kind of a blue will make some pretty nice violets. If you look at the previous one that I did, which was the blocks yellow, but the quin red instead, this one here, which is a PR 209, so it's very different red, you can see that. So this red mixed with the primary blue that I have here gave me a very interesting violet or purple. Let's see what this one will do, and then it'll be fun to compare the two, because that right there is usually a very big difference. There. And why the magenta will give us this color of purple, a very bright purple, is because magenta is a little bit closer to purple than it is to the bright red that has yellow in it. So I'm going to let that dry before I look at it because it will change. And now this violet here is going to be a little bit lighter. And then again, more light. And violet or purple is a very dark color, and when you mix it with its complement, you get a black. In the same way that if you take orange and you mix that with blue, which is the complementary color on the color wheel, you'll get a black. The green and red will also do that. So let's take a look at that. I think I could have gotten just a little bit more in here, eh? Yeah. These two are very close. Hard to change right now. It is what it is. Maybe it's not too bad. See what it looks like when it dries. Now, my last effort here is going to mix blacks and grays, and that'll be my line down here. All right. So let's get started with mixing some purple. And in this case, I'm going to take a little bit of yellow. So let's try my purple mix in yellow. And I have more of a brown color. So I might need a little bit more purpley color here. It's got a lot of red in it, so more blue. Okay. There we go. Let's try this. All I want to do is take a look at my purple and my yellow. Now this, put it down here. It's always an interesting color to mix. I don't want it to be too yellow, but if I put too much yellow, it will turn brown. So let's just see what we get out of that. It's actually quite pretty. And if you're looking to darken a yellow, for example, you might choose to do something like that. Let's just take a little bit of this yellow over here. And just throw it in here and see what happens as it mixes with the yellow in the back. Okay, just wet on wet versus mixed and on dry. So now I have this black. Let me try another black. Let's try the red, which was here. Red and green. So the green that I have on this side is going to be a lot of color there. Getting a little darker, more like a black. It gets really nice and black, doesn't it? And let's just bring that down. Oh, it starts to get purple because I had more purple on my brush there. All right. That color is very much a gray, but just simply with a red bias now. All right. And then, which one did I not do? So blue and orange. Let me see here. I've got some orange in here. And I will take a little bit of blue. Let's bring that in here. Blue is very strong, so you'll need more orange than blue. All right. I'll need more blue. And that's getting pretty dark. Just a bit more. I might have crossed that barrier there, but let's use it anyway. Yeah, not too bad. That's a nice dark again. And of course, if we water that down a bit, it becomes a very neutral kind of a gray. Very nice, very pretty. And if I just simply take all the colors together and mix them all up, I can get black, right? Because really, all these mixes are mixes of only 3 colors. So what is also interesting is when I mix my primary and I add just a little bit of that gray, whatever I have there, and I still have a primary color, but it's subdued. It's not as bright. It's not as intense. You see, this color here, very intense, pure out of the tube, very bright. But if I add grays to it, then I tone it down and I actually start getting some shadow. So if this is too blue, you can add a little bit of red. And we're getting very deep, very strong, very dark. Play with your mixes. See what works for you. This is a bias on the blue side. This to me is another bias on the yellow side. This is almost middle of the line gray, very, very dark color, but it's gray-black. And I don't see a lot of other bias, maybe more on the blue side, if anything else. This more red, more red. This one more yellow. So look at your colors. It depends on what it is that you're painting. And then just basically experiment. Okay, so here we have it. Basically just our little color chart here that was made of using the colors Block's Yellow, Quinacridone, magenta in this case, and the primary blue. Basically, we see what they how they mix to get the secondary colors, and we also see what they do in order to create neutrals when you mix them together. So comparing this to the last one that I had done, which was the quinacridone red instead of the quinacridone magenta, we do see some slight variations in some of the colors. It's especially in the orange that we see a difference, and somewhat also with the violet mix, which is a little bit more desaturated than this one. So give it a try yourself and make sure to do these values of the paints that you use in your paintings. And the reason why values are so important in watercolor, it's simply because without value, we will not see anything. Our eyes need to see the difference in the color. It's not color, but in the uh, tones or tints and basically what it is that we see as black and white, and then the grays in between. So each color can be translated to a black and white and a middle value. And that is what our eye wants to see. So when you don't have your value range, like for example in this orange, or even from the yellow to the darker grays or whatever, you just don't get the contrast, right? So very important to keep values in mind, and you will see them very clearly when you take your picture that you want to paint from and turn it into a black and white image as opposed to a color image. Each color has a specific value even before you do anything with it. So the yellows are always light, period. That's not ever going to change. The reds are going to be your middle values as well as your greens. And your darker values are going to be your primary colors, from the blues to the any of the blues that you might have, even the violets, right? So the mixes. So give this a try, mix your darks and get some beautiful neutrals. This one was one black was mixed and then a gradation, just doing the same little value trick that I showed you with my water and brush, bringing it down to very pale. And this one we had different mixes with different colors mixes from these three. So more orange or more blue in this case, or more yellow in this case. Play with that and you'll learn lots from this exercise. Thanks for watching.